doesn't come out till December 1st, so we're kind of in limbo right now. We don't have we can't. There's not much to talk about in terms of like what to do on topic prep, and so now is just a great time to pedal to the metal and get through drills and just knock them out. So why don't we start up a speech drop, and we'll just kind of work on a boatload of issues that we can iron out. So yeah, let's start with. You said you wanted to start with 2 ARs though.
Yeah.
Are those old rounds? Or just generally just 2 AR?
Just like generally.
Okay, I'm gonna give a quick synopsis on the 2 AR. 2 AR breakdown.
Okay.
2 AR is the shortest speech in debate.
Yep.
Right. And but also the last speech in debate, right? Shortest and last speech, right? And there's a lot of strategic advantage to the 2 AR. Most notably, the one that shoots the last word, right?
Yes.
But you also, this is one that people I don't think about as much, is you get the last word, or you get new. So there's this idea no new in the 2, right? Like,
yeah,
generally understood, common conception, but you are granted new responses to 2 R arguments, 2 R weighing, or add-ons, right?
Yeah.
So, in that respect, the 2 AR is definitely advantageous, right? So the way that I like to see it is that the way that you make the 2 AR, basically the goal in the debate as affirmative should be to skew the 2 AR in your favor. And because of the fact that you have only 3 minutes, it's not a speech that's really designed to address multiple issues. Rather, it's a speech that's really designed to spend its entirety, so to speak, on one particular issue.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm.
And the only way that can be possible is the 1 AR should sit up properly, right?
Mm.
The 1 AR needs to generate some offense, right? Or some route to the ballot. Ideally, that isn't derived from the app, right? To have a strict advantage in the 2 AR.
Yeah.
So, this is the last thing I have to say, and then we'll kind of just jump into drills. So that you can really understand and put this in perspective, right? The negative, anytime the negative can respond to something through 2 speeches, they're going to have a huge time advantage, right?
Mm.
So, you don't really want to be reliant on just like the contention of the app, right? You want another route to the ballot. So, even if your opponent was ACNC, I'd argue that it'd be strategic to have one other route to the ballot, right? This is where new things come into play. So, things that you really need to consider to take make your debates a lot easier and get yourself debating to the next level is, so basic is theory, right? One 1 AR advantage or 1 AR add-on.
Yeah.
And that can also be included / critique, right?
Yeah.
And then the third option is just really like just number 3 is going to be offense independent of the app. Shot, escape, turns, whatever. So, number 1 thing you have to keep in mind is, with the 2 AR, you have to collapse the debate. You can't address multiple issues. That means that you have to have one of three elements, right, in order to have a successful two-way AR. You either need to have a theory argument, a new one AR advantage, add-on, or critique, or offense independent of the gap, right? The reason why two ARs are so difficult nowadays, the reason why Neg is able to win so many rounds, is because the AF doesn't grant themselves, and doesn't give themselves any doesn't give themselves any strategic option, really, outside of the AF, right? So, imagine this. Negative, let's just, even NC-AC. Negative reads an NC, right? And they dump on the AC. In the 1AR, you have two jobs. You have to answer back the NC, and then you need to deal with all this dump on the AF, and then win the AF, right?
Yeah.
And when you think about it, the debate on the AF is very disproportionate. Your opponent can either just do not beat back the NC or beat back the AC, or they can say the framework comes first, right? Or NC comes before.
Yeah.
While, given that you just split your time in the 2AR, you're gonna be strained, regardless of which one they do, right? If we follow this model where the last speech is collapsed, right, where the 2R goes for one thing and you go for one thing, you're always gonna be screwed over because they have 6 minutes on whatever issue that they choose to go for. If you go for NC-AC in your 1AR, right, you return to the NC and you answer the NC framework and you extend the AF and you defend the AF, right? 2R has an easy route to the bout. They just choose one option. Do I want to go hard for the NC or do I want to go hard against the AF? They spend 6 minutes on that, and then you're really screwed because you split 4 minutes of time, and realistically, you're not gonna have the type of leverage in your 3-minute 2AR to be able to win, whatever particular issue they spent time on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Let's jump into it then. Let's go to speech drop. Make a room called, it's going to be called Ethan 1125.
Cool.
So you're, here we go. Okay, there we go. Just sent you it. The last topic was development assistance. So yeah, just pop in your AF, and then I'm gonna look at it and give you some ideas of what a 2AR, what type of 2ARs we should practice.
All right.
Was this your September, October AF, or did you read this November, December?
This was November, December.
Okay, so right now, let's just do one straight up 2AR where you're going for the AF. I'll give you like a minute or a minute 30. And really, this time that I'm giving you here is just for you to decide, okay, in an ideal world where, because this is the thing, we've debated this AF before.
Yeah.
You kind of know how the common strategy against it is. Assume that, in their 2R, they answer framework and they maybe extended a turn or two, right? They kind of just covered everything, right? So, when you're doing your extensions, explain, this takes out these 3 objections, right? It takes out this argument that would say X. It takes out this argument, right? For example, if I was defending a util, I would extend Wooler and I'd be like, this takes out their arguments for, this takes out their arguments for actor specificity because this indicates that actually util is most consistent with actors, right? And then I'd be like, they might be right that, that certain governmental actors use the deontological maxim, like the judicial system, But when we're talking about legislative bodies, they have to evaluate trade-offs because they're policymakers, right? And there's a distinction between, policymakers and just Supreme Court justices, etc., right?
Uh-huh.
So just do small little interactions like that. I'm giving you a minute 30, which I think is a good time to just kind of, organize your speech. And then I want to just see you give the whole 3-minute speech.
Okay.
Like, honestly, it's like you should have an ideal 2AR written out. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. Okay, cool. Time starts now.
All right.
I would like to make a toast. Dad, no. I promise not to embarrass you.
No, please do.
My mind went to some dark places when the bursar's office called to inform me that Connor had withdrawn from law school. Here we go. Circuit parties, F parties, but now that I'm here, I can't tell you all how happy it makes me to see the second family that my son has here. All right, we done? Connor? Law school? No law school? You have been and always will be my teacher. Cheers.
She left without even telling me. Because she's a cliche, a lazy-ass millennial.
That's probably good.
Bad ones. Any chance you want to come help me sort through 1,000 case files?
I'm in my mind. Just gonna give me practice, I'll say. See how bad I blow it.
You're going to do fine.
Let's hope. See you later.
Frank?
You okay?
I met Connor's dad tonight.
Time's coming up.
He's,
Cool.
he's pretty normal.
All right.
Cool. All right. Here we go.
1 sec. Let me get my clock up.
So 3-minute 2AR, the usual business. Just get after it, Well, think about this. Literally, what is my perfect 2AR? And that's what I want. That's what I'm looking for, basically. All right, here we go.
All right.
Remember, signpost. Don't force the speed. Start slow, speed up, all that good stuff. Make sure you pause between different signposting.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
Let's start right. Judge, they fundamentally misunderstand the framework. This is an overview to the 2AR. This means that all their extinction impacts are going to be excluded, and only the AF is going to end up solving anything. Overview to the framework, or extensions on the framework. First, extend Ripstein if freedom comes first, and Pettit 1 saying that non-domination is the type of freedom that we should use because it avoids paradoxes, and what this framework means is that we have to stop arbitrary intervention, and any capacity to do so means that someone has domination over another. What my opponent misunderstands is that there's not different scales of domination. There's only one scale of domination. Either you're dominated or you're not dominated. And extinction impact happening to people in these developing countries, and the structural violence impacts that are happening to people in structural violence impacts like war and econ fall doesn't matter under the AFT framework, because we only care about one form of domination, whether they're dominated or whether they're not. Lovett 16 proves that these people in these countries are dominated, so only the AF contention is going to end up solving. Go to the AF contention now. First, extend Minio and Reddy 10 saying that development assistance promotes long economic growth. This study first outweighs on scope. Don't look at their studies in the context of foreign aid. For foreign aid in general, they may be correct, but for development assistance specifically, all of their studies are wrong. They only say foreign aid, so they don't even link at all. My study specifically says development assistance, so that's what you're going to be voting off in the round. Also preferred on scope because their studies specifically only account for 1975 through 1995, which is not the SQUO. This Minio and Reddy is much more recent, meaning that I went off of specificity because these policies change, and you can't cross apply old policies and say that new policies are bad because the old policies didn't work. Like, the old policies are gone for a reason, and that's why we have new policies that actually do work. Also extend the specificity argument because foreign aid won't. Even if development aid is accounted under foreign aid, there's still other factors that are going to end up skewing it. The AF outweighs the AF doesn't care about the extinction impacts. They fundamentally misunderstand the framework, and they don't even propose a new framework. They just read two disadvantages and then read case turns, but none of the case turns apply since they're so outdated, and because they're so limited in scope. This study, Minio and Reddy, accounts for every single country that's developing.
Okay, pretty decent speech in terms of cohesiveness. So what I mean is it's together. It's one consistent theme, right? The entirety is, I'm going for the app. I'm proving util doesn't link. Boom, that's accomplished. Now we're going to talk about the content, right? So starting off with the overview. Overviews are designed to be simple. They shouldn't be complicated, but at the same time, they shouldn't state the obvious. Your determination, or like the discretion that you need to exercise as to whether you do a overview or not is basically a very low threshold. The question you need to ask yourself is, does this tell the judge something they wouldn't otherwise know, right? Like, is this something that's not exceedingly obvious, right? And I think that you're treading that fine line. Like, I don't know. I wouldn't say for sure whether this is, like, obvious or whether this is not. But basically, I think that you shouldn't just... The goal of the overview isn't just to use, like, good rhetoric and be like, oh, yeah, like, they had a fun... You know what I mean? It's to say...
Yeah.
This round breaks down. If I win my no link arguments to their framework, or like if I win their util impacts don't link, you'll vote off of the AF, right? Because there's not enough work done on the contention debate, and I'm way ahead on there, right? So really, what it is like, I think the way you should think about every overview is just like, this round was a race, right? We're running a race. Me and my opponent are running a race. All the overviews should do is set benchmarks. This is where they're at, and this is where I'm at. And this is what it takes to get to the finish line. That's what you should think about it as. This is what they've done. This is what I'm doing. And this is why what I'm going to do is going to win. Right?
Okay.
That's how I think that I don't know if that's that view is overcomplicating it, but I think that's a great way to think about it because, you know, you can be running a race and you can run with a completely different style, right? And you can be running at a certain pace, right? And your opponent could be running at a different pace. But it doesn't really matter. All that matters is who finishes first, right? Or who gets to the finish line, right?
Yeah.
So they might be using a certain pair of tennis shoes, and you might be using a different pair. They might be running with a certain arch in their step, or they might be way ahead of us, right? They might be running really fast, but who knows? You might know a shortcut, or you might know how to trip them up, right? So that's kind of like what is going on in the debate round, right? You're like, okay, here's the current state of affairs in the debate round. Like, here's what's going on right now. Here's the status quo. Here's what's going to happen by the end of this speech. Boom. That's all it should say.
Yeah.
Okay. Extensions. You might get away with these in more circuity rounds because, you know, you might have extended them in the 1AR and explained them better. But I'm highly skeptical. You need to think about it this way. Though the 2AR is shorter of a speech, the development of argumentations is supposed to be much greater in the 2AR. And the reason behind this is that you're collapsing the debate. You have 3 minutes to focus on one issue. If the one issue is the AF, every argument should be well explained. What does that look like? That looks like you should only really be extending necessary framework justifications, right? I think that you're doing that. I don't think you're extending like a ton of random unnecessary ones. Like I like your strategic vision in that sense, but I think your explanation needs to go a step further. Like
Yeah.
the first argument you make is freedom comes first, right? Why? Like you just say extend Ripstein, freedom comes first, and then extend Parfit. Non-denomination is the best framework because it avoids paradoxes, right?
Yeah.
It sounds like a reiteration of taglines. I don't really know what the paradox is. I don't know how you avoid it, right? What paradox? Those are like just basically you should think about it like you're a teacher every time that you're debating. You're trying to spit some knowledge on people, like they need to know the truth about this framework, like why non-domination is so important, or like why it has to be our basis for ethical decision making. As for what you're doing on the weighing, I think it's a monumental improvement. I'm not going to nitpick. There are things that you can do better with that, but we'll come back to that. So let's take one more crack at it. I'm only going to give you 1 minute because you have this. I think you have the core of the speech. Now it's just about, do you really know your stuff? Can you execute it like with all the proper explanation?
Prince, before you start time, I'm going to fill up my water bottle.
Okay, sure, no problem. Actually, yeah, okay. Starting time now.
Cool.
3 minutes. And yeah.
Okay. 1 sec. I want to turn your volume up a bit. All right, 3 minutes. Let's start time right. Judge Extend Ripstein, this card says that the difference between freedom comes first because it's the only thing that can distinguish people from objects. People have the freedom to choose their own choices, but objects don't have the freedom to choose their own choices. Extend Pettit 1. This clarifies what freedom actually is, and we should consider it in the realm of domination, whether one is being dominated or not, or whether one has the capability to arbitrarily interfere. Extend Thomas 16. This card says that domination can also act on the state level scale. So first is actor specific, but second it means that every single person in countries that are being dominated is also being dominated. This is going to come in the key play with the contention, but more on the framework first. They fundamentally misunderstand my framework. This is the biggest mistake in the round. They read structural violence impacts, but they misunderstand that domination is a binary. It's not like you can be more dominated or less dominated. You can only be either dominated or not dominated. And since I've proven that every single person in these countries that are that need development assistance is being dominated because they're unequal they're in countries that are unequal to other countries, that means that their structural violence impacts don't matter because they're just trying to put more domination, or they're trying to add domination to domination that already exists.